The woman accused of fatally poisoning her husband may have also been giving him her own antipsychotic medication. We're breaking down the biggest revelations from newly unsealed documents, including an autopsy report related to Kouri Richins and her husband Eric's death, with forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 33-year-old mother of three, Kouri Richins, is accused of killing her husband Eric in March of 2022, and prosecutors charged her with aggravated murder and drug possession after she allegedly put 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his drink before bed. Now, Richins' housekeeper, a convicted drug dealer named Carmen Marie Lauber, had allegedly confessed to authorities that she supplied Richins with dozens of fentanyl pills on 2 separate occasions, approximately 1 month before Eric's death, and said that Kouri paid her about $900 each time. Now, Kouri was arrested on murder and drug charges in May of 2023 after she wrote and published a children's book called Are You With Me? To help her sons deal with the loss of their father. And most famously, she went on local news, a local news station, a program talking about the book before her arrest. A judge ended up denying her bail, so she's been locked up ever since. Prosecutors have suggested that the motive for the murder was financial, that Kouri owned a real estate company. She had arguments with Eric before his death about the possible purchase of a multi-million-dollar Utah home that she hoped to flip and sell for a profit. Court documents also state that Kouri had purchased 4 different life insurance policies on Eric, totaling almost $2 million. Then, in January of 2022, Kouri reportedly changed the beneficiary for Eric's policy to herself without his authorization. Eric apparently found out, changed the beneficiary to his sister, removed Kouri from his will. Kouri also allegedly spent money on Eric's credit cards, his bank accounts, his business credit line. And when Eric found this out, he reportedly started looking for or talking to a divorce lawyer. This was back in 2020, but all of this kind of gives you the backstory of the couple. But now we are learning new details. And for that, let me bring on forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University and host of the Body Bags podcast, my good friend, Joseph Scott Morgan. Good to see you, sir. How you doing?
It's good to be with you, Jesse. Great to be back and chatting about this case. It's certainly intriguing.
It is intriguing, and I want to start with like this big bombshell. And when we thought about who to ask, you know where we're coming to you. So according to this newly unsealed search warrant from, I believe, the sheriff's office, in Eric's autopsy, the medical examiner's office noted that there was a small amount of, and I hope I don't butcher the name here, quetiapine. Am I saying that? How do I say it?
Quetiapine.
Quetiapine. Also as Seroquel, and that was
Seroquel. Let's roll with Seroquel. How's that?
Seroquel. Let's roll with that. It was found in Eric's stomach.
Right.
What is this drug, and what do you make of it?
Okay, the drug essentially is an antipsychotic, and it's actually prescribed for people that are dealing with issues regarding schizophrenia most of the time, and also associated depressive disorders when they're like in a manic phase. So a physician would prescribe it to somebody with severe bipolar disorder, perhaps, and it's a dangerous drug. It's very dangerous. And apparently, as Miss Richins is concerned, this drug had allegedly been prescribed to her for a sleep aid.
Well, let's be clear about that. So she says, let's back this up, right? So this drug, you're right, treats things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. But according to the search warrant affidavit, Kouri had a prescription for this. Eric did not. And Kouri told detectives that it was used as a sleeping aid, but the medical examiner, as far as I can tell, said that is not what this drug is used for.
Yeah, and it's important to delineate that because this is a very dangerous drug. If you're not experiencing a need for this can really have some serious side effects, both from a mental standpoint, obviously, but also physiologically. How your body is going to respond to it. You're already dealing with him being dosed with fentanyl, which it pushes the individual into a depressed respiratory state. And many times that's the mechanism for them dying. And then you have this outlier of Seroquel, which is To say that it would be a contraindicated, it would be contraindicated as something you should not do is certainly an understatement. It can cause all kinds of heart problems relative to these individuals, everything from hyper to hypotension in an acute phase. What is really intriguing about this, Jesse, is that what the medical examiner is saying relative to the drug. Note, they're not saying that they drew this up and this was discovered in his bloodstream. They're saying that this was found in his stomach content. So that
Mm-hmm.
means that this drug was applied to him within just a couple of hours of him dying. Because we can the digestive system moves at a predictable rate.
Right.
Okay. And so if you have gastric content, and at the risk of being too graphic, I'll try to soft pedal it a little bit. But at autopsy, one of the things that occurs is that the stomach is literally removed and tied off at both
Mm.
ends. And we very carefully go through the contents of the stomach in a very um, controlled manner at autopsy. And we will collect all of the gastric content that is therein. That'll be placed in a tube. And then that is actually examined at the tox lab separate from blood and urine and all those other things.
That's good to know because people are looking at this and saying, wait, if it wasn't his medication and it was hers, could she have slipped it into that drink? Is that would that be a way that it could have gotten into his stomach?
Yeah, it could have been. Or, and here's the one thing that we don't know, Jesse, is that many times at autopsy, one of the things, if you go through and you read a forensic autopsy report, um, the pathologist, when there's actually a section, uh, some will have a subsection called gastric content, and then sometimes it'll just fall under the digestive system. But either way, if there is particulate, what appears to be pill matter, is what they'll refer to it as, because it doesn't change a lot when it enters the stomach. Remember, pills have coatings on them. They're very
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
resilient. Some of them are time release, that sort of thing. So you can still appreciate these in place. And I really wonder if, when the pathologist was taking a look at the content, if they actually saw pill fragments, or if this was something that was ground up so fine that he ingested it. I don't really know how water
Oh,
soluble it is, though.
that's really interesting because, in other words, you're saying if it was ground up and placed in the drink that he wouldn't have noticed this versus if it was a solid pill. And it also matters because it would determine how long the pill was there. Like, for example, if he ingested it, I don't know, 7 hours before versus right, the time he drank this drink, that would been they're able to determine that, right?
Yeah, and I'd be very surprised if he were to ingest a liquid. I'm just arbitrarily pulling
Right.
this number. You had mentioned 7, that there would still be evidence in the stomach at
What
7 hours. I think that you have to tighten down that time window.
or she gave him a pill saying it was something else, like here, this is a,
Yeah,
and real quick, if you don't know this, it's fine.
sure.
Would on the pill, would it say what it is? Does it look like a different kind of medication?
It depends on the branding,
Okay.
and it'll be stamped essentially. And all these pills have some kind of unique stamp that goes along with them. For Seroquel, I'm not sure. I don't think it's a scored pill though, where it has the line that goes down the
Yeah.
middle where you can break it in two. It is prescribed again for people that have serious psychotic issues, and the fact that I think it says a lot about her.
By the way, another aspect to the Richins case is that aside from the criminal case, she's also on an ongoing legal battle with Eric's family regarding inheritance and his wrongful death. And when thinking of lawsuits, particularly when it comes to personal injury lawsuits, let me talk to you for a minute about Hanley Hockey Giordano, because whether you're hurt at work or an accident or even Social Security disability injuries, whatever it may be, you're going to need an experienced team in your corner, and Ponley Hockey Giordano is a powerhouse law firm. They're known for winning all different kinds of injury cases, recovering over $1 billion for their clients, winning over 100,000 cases. It's not that they're just lawyers. They're all about fighting and advocating for your rights. So if you're in a healthcare crisis, allow them to jump in and take care of the hard part for you. You can check out Ponley Hockey Giordano at ponleyhockey.com/LC Sidebar, or you can pick up the phone and call them at 833-669-4043. All right, let's get back to Richins. So if she really did do, if she, is allegedly gave him this pill in conjunction with the drink, in conjunction with fentanyl, that would have deadly consequences. Have you ever heard of someone ODing from this, a toxic, fatal interaction?
No. And okay, let's back up.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anyone specifically ODing on Seroquel. It doesn't mean that
Okay.
it hasn't happened. I think the potential could exist. However, here's the key. Fentanyl itself, you don't know what you're getting. When you say fentanyl, we're not talking about pharmaceutical grade fentanyl like you would be administered, or a doctor in the hospital for pain relief. All right. If this is coming from a drug dealer, there's a high probability this is something that is manufactured outside of outside of a pharmaceutical company. So you don't know what the mixture is going to be with that. Now, on top of that, and that's going to have the fentanyl properties, but on top of that, you introduce this other drug into this deadly mix, and that's where the lethality comes in, Jesse.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the affidavit, they said that the fentanyl that was in his system was, quote, illicit and not pharmaceutical grade. So they were able to determine that this was like, street stuff. But going back now, so she's prescribed this. She claims to detectives it's a sleeping aid. I believe authorities have requested her medical records to get to the bottom of this. Have you ever heard it being used as a sleeping aid? And if it wasn't prescribed as a sleeping aid, and she wasn't honest with detectives, what do we think about this?
Oh my God. There are so many other drugs she could be prescribed for having difficulty sleeping, like Ambien, that is specifically there for that purpose. You would have to be, in order for, I think, any physician that is rightly practicing, there would have to be a rationale to go to Seroquel. It certainly would not
as a sleeping aid.
Yeah, as a sleeping aid, it would not be the first choice on the list. It's going to cause drowsiness. As a matter of fact, I've heard of people that have taken Seroquel, and if they're in like an acute psychotic phase and they're given this medication, it drags them down so low where they almost become like zombies, and they can sleep for hours and hours. Some people have slept for up to 48 hours on this stuff. So that gives you, it gives you some idea as to how powerful this stuff is. Yeah.
And if this was prescribed to her, she would have known that, which again, if you're going to poison your husband and you want him dosed and you want him lethargic or you want him zombied out, again, I don't know, but that's where I'm starting to go with this medication. Now,
I don't know. In a hypothetical, I could go with purpose and intent.
Yeah,
when you begin to think about it. Yeah.
Well, that's what leads me to this next part, because the fact that she was prescribed this medication, my mind now goes to mental health defense. So the Cleveland Clinic, the website says that this drug, it's an antipsychotic medication. You mentioned talks about schizophrenia, bipolar, balances the level of dopamine and serotonin in your brain. But the Utah statute says that it is a defense to a prosecution under any statute or ordinance that the defendant, as a result of a mental condition, lacked the mental state required as an element of the offense charged. And for aggravated murder, you need to prove intention. You need to prove that they did this intentionally or knowingly. So now I'm wondering if she's being treated for what could be a very serious psychotic condition. Does that lead you to think that maybe she might have a mental health defense?
Oh, quite possibly. But as you know, with mental health defense, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if she is out of her mind, psychotic, how does she have the ability to begin to formulate this idea where she could allegedly, this is a hypothetical, weaponize a prescribed medication? How in that higher realm of thinking, I'm going to try to take out my husband. So what can I do in order to facilitate that? Well, I have enough good sense to know that these two things, if you place them together, there's a high probability that if it doesn't kill an individual, it certainly could put them in a coma.
And by the way, just to take a step back from this case, we know that it's been alleged that this wasn't even the first time that Kouri had tried to poison Eric, that Eric had broke out in hives. He had trouble breathing after eating a sandwich that was prepared by Kouri the month before his death. Eric became ill in Greece a few years back after Kouri gave him a drink, and he allegedly said that, she was trying to kill him. He reportedly told loved ones that if something happened to him, Kouri was to blame. I mean, what do you make of that in your experience in terms of seeing somebody who's accused or found guilty of poisoning another? Is there usually attempts beforehand? Because let's be clear, her attorneys have said, quote, there has not been a single text message or other document turned over in discovery to support the allegation that Eric ever believed Kouri attempted to poison him. So you tell me what you think about the alleged past actions.
Well, I
or
think
attempts.
that yeah, and I think that you would have to go back and kind of, the circumstances. I found the circumstances in Greece kind of interesting, going all the way back, and now in light of this finding that they've released relative to the discovery. You're not going to have a local fentanyl dealer in Greece if you're traveling over there. So what kind of agent could have been applied to him over there that would have caused this kind of reaction? Now, I guess you could take fentanyl tablets there and maybe they wouldn't look at it. I have no idea, but it's kind of risky. So I certainly hope that from a toxicological standpoint, they're going to take a very broad spectrum view at this. And I'm sure that they probably have. And I mean, nothing at this point, Jesse, nothing would be off the table for me. I would even consider things like heavy metals as well. And hoping also that at his autopsy, the medical examiner, which I have no doubt that they did, took sufficient sampling at the autopsy, everything from organ tissue, the hair with roots, um, nail clippings. I just hope that they did everything that they possibly could to take a look, to go down every possible avenue that they could to glean as much info as possible.
Joseph Scott Morgan, forensic death investigator from Jacksonville State University, host of the Body Bags podcast. My good friend, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You bet, buddy.
All right, everybody, that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.